A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Consider your own calling, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. Rather, God chose the foolish of the world to shame the wise. And God chose the weak of the world to shame the strong. And God chose the lowly and despised of the world, those who count for nothing, to reduce to nothing those who are something, so that no human being might boast before God. It is due to him that you are in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, as well as righteousness, sanctification, and redemption, so that, as it is written, whoever boasts should boast in the Lord. Verbum Domini. Blessed the people the Lord has chosen to be his own. Blessed the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen for his own inheritance. From heaven the Lord looks down, he sees all mankind. But see, the eyes of the Lord are upon those who fear him, upon those who hope for his kindness, to deliver them from death and preserve them in spite of famine. Our soul waits for the Lord, who is our help and our shield, for in him our hearts rejoice. In his holy name we trust.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called in his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. Immediately the one who received 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5. Likewise the one who received 2 made another 2. But the man who received 1 went off and dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing the additional 5. He said, "Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come share your master's joy." Then the one who had received 2 talents also came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you are faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come share your master's joy." Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward and said, "Master, I knew you were a demanding person, harvesting where you did not plant, and gathering where you did not scatter. So out of fear, I went off and buried your talent in the ground. Here it is back." The master said to him in reply, "You wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I did not plant and gather where I did not scatter. Should you not then have put my money in the bank so that I could have had it back with interest on my return? Now then, take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And throw this useless servant into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth." Verbum Domini. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. These are words that all of the saints heard as the end of their lives came, that they would hear the Lord say those words, that they had used the talents and what God had given to them. They had used it for his purposes. They had done much to help to extend the kingdom through their prayers, their lives, and their works. And now they enjoy that eternal reward. And one of the greatest doctors of the church, he's been called, in fact, the doctor of the doctors of the church, we celebrate today, St. Augustine, a man with a brilliant intellect, but also with a passionate love for God. In fact, if you go to EWTN's website today, and we have updated our website. If you haven't been there, check it out. There are those who travel throughout. We received an email from someone who travels internationally, and other people who the only way that they can receive the network is by downstreaming the video or the audio. And so now that's even more, it's easier for you to do that. But on the front page, the home page of EWTN today is a painting of St. Augustine. And it perhaps says the most about him and about who he is. Because you see there pictured St. Augustine holding in one hand a burning heart. And then you see in the other hand, he's got a pen with which he is writing. And then he's looking up to heaven. And so that tells us something about Augustine. He wrote more than we could ever read. His sermons, his teachings. It said that no one could ever read everything that St. Augustine wrote. But something that Pope Benedict said about Augustine, one of the reasons that he likes him, in fact, this past Wednesday in his general audience, he mentioned St. Augustine. He said that we need companions on the way of life, and especially those that we have been named for. So he has a devotion, he said, to Joseph, his baptismal name, and to Benedict, his name as pontiff. But also he mentioned specifically St. Augustine, who he said has been in my journey through my life, through study and prayer, all along. And he talked about Augustine as being one who was never satisfied with just a ray of truth, that he was restless, he was anxious until he could grasp the entire truth. And then he discovered that it was really the truth that was pursuing him. It was the Lord. In another place, Pope Benedict had said that one of the reasons he loves Augustine is because in Augustine, the passionate, struggling, questioning man is there, and you can identify with him. He's not just a dry intellect, although he was a brilliant intellect, and the church uses his sermons and his teachings so frequently in the divine office, more than any other doctor or teacher in the church for her divine office. But you don't find a dry, cerebral intellect there. You find a passionate man who is seeking the truth. And this past Wednesday, the Holy Father made an appeal to those who have stopped practicing their faith, or those who live as if God doesn't exist. He said, don't be afraid to continue to pursue the truth. That Augustine, as he continued, he made mistakes along the way. There were times of sadness. There were times when he was a failure. But he was never satisfied with just the ray of truth that he had discovered. He wanted the whole truth. And so he had that well-known reading from St. Augustine's Confessions this morning in the office. Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever true. Late have I loved you. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. That our minds are not going to be satisfied with anything less than the truth. And our hearts are not going to be satisfied with anything than love. So we find this so often in the Psalms. You see truth and love. Walk in your presence, Lord. That often we find this combination of truth and love. And this we see in Augustine. That he's one who sought the truth, but he was also one who had this passionate, fiery love and this encounter with the Lord. Listen to some of his words. O eternal truth, true love, and beloved eternity, you are my God. To you do I sigh day and night. You overcame the weakness of my vision, sending forth most strongly the beams of your light, and I trembled at once with love and dread. An Augustinian friar, Tarsicius von Bavel, wrote this. He said, love, common life, and friendship are at the heart of his life and thought. A superficial reading of his Confessions can give the impression that Augustine was an introvert, constantly busy with self-analysis. The reality was very different. One is surprised to learn that this man was scarcely ever alone. He himself admitted that he could not possibly be happy without friends. In fact, after the death of his mother Monica, he returned to North Africa, sold everything, and built a monastery. And that was how he lived the rest of his life, eventually becoming a bishop and a pastor for some 34 years. But even as a bishop, he continued to live with other clerics. Friendship was a part of their common life. And there are a couple of, in fact, it's said of Augustine that no one wrote more on friendship than Augustine. And that St. Bernard of Clairvaux and Alred, his friend, who wrote a great deal on friendship, it said that many of the thoughts that they expounded on came from St. Augustine. But listen to these words from his Confessions about the beauty of friendship. And this was as a young man, what he experienced in friendship. And I think it's a good description of what a true friendship is. He said, all kinds of things rejoiced my soul in their company, to talk and laugh, and to do each other kindnesses, to pass from lightest jesting to talk of the deepest things, to disagree without rancor, as one might disagree with oneself, and then to reason through this, to teach each other and to learn from each other, to be impatient for the return of the absent, and to welcome them with joy on their homecoming. These and such like things proceeding from our hearts as we gave affection and received it back, as shown by face, by voice, by the eyes, and by 1,000 other pleasing gestures, kindled a flame which fused our souls together, and of many made us one. Here's another quote from St. Augustine. This was after he was a bishop and he had many responsibilities and burdens. And he said, and again, he was continued to live monastic life with other clerics as a bishop. He said, I admit that I readily throw myself entirely on the love of my most intimate friends, especially when I am wearied of the world's scandals. And I find rest in that love, free of anxiety. This is because I feel that God, upon whom I cast myself without fear, and in whom I find secure rest is present there. That in good, holy, healthy friendships, he finds God there. He finds a reflection of God's loving concern, of his encouragement, of his support in friendships. And it's really only friendships that are in the Lord, as Augustine's were, that are something that has an enduring quality about them. That we can have friendships that are just based on earthly things, and they kind of come and go as our interests come and go. But when we had a friendship that is deep in the Lord, as Augustine said, from lightest jesting to talk about the deepest things. And that's one of the things that's a blessing to me in my own religious life, is that I have brothers that I can do both of those with. Talk with lightest jesting, and Father Anthony has a great sense of humor that keeps things light. To talk of the deepest things, the things of God, that we can discuss these things. We can argue without rancor and come to conclusions about these things, so that we're all in this search, this quest to know the truth and to know it in all of its fullness and completeness, which leads us to freedom. The truth sets us free. St. Augustine said of the Scriptures that they remain unclear, and some have said that he knew the Scriptures almost by heart. He said that the Scriptures would remain unclear until one sees them in the light of the two great commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. That when you read the Scriptures, to see it in that context, the love of God, the love of neighbor. And then there will be a certain clarity that comes out of those Scriptures. In fact, he said, for each individual person, God has a particular Scripture that is yours. But there will be one that especially resonates with you. And that shows, his love for each of us as individual persons. That there will be one that is a particular way for us, that resounds with us, that is in a way a path for our own life and an explanation of who we are. At the end of his life, Augustine saw the fall of the Roman Empire to the Vandals. And yet he refused to believe that the end of the Roman Empire was the end of Christianity. Hippo, his see, was under siege by Vandal troops when he died on August 28th in the year 430. He died praying the 7 penitential psalms that were copied and hanging before him on the wall of his room. He was one who was very slow to judge, since he himself had experienced the mercy of the Lord. In fact, he said, "Let us understand that God is a physician, and that suffering is a medicine for salvation. It's not a punishment for damnation." That when we encounter suffering in our life, that it is meant to lead us to this deeper life with God, to, in some cases, to bring us to a conversion of heart or a deepening conversion of our lives, in order that we might come to salvation and this life with God. One other point about his table. He had a beautiful inscription. Maybe we should all have this on our own tables in our homes. And on his table was inscribed these words: "Whoever likes to chew on the life of one who is absent, let him know that he is not welcome at this table." So you weren't to chew by gossip about the lives of others at that table. And in fact, on one time it said he placed charity above politeness when he pointed out this inscription to a group of offending bishops dining with him. Read that. "Whoever likes to chew on the life of one who is absent, let him know that he is not welcome at this table." I'd like to conclude with some of his words about the longing that we all experience, and it's a longing that can only be satisfied in God. Think again of that image or that painting of St. Augustine. In one hand, a burning heart, in the other, a pen, and the other looking up to heaven. He says the whole life of a good Christian is a holy longing. What you long for, as yet you do not see. but longing makes in you the room that shall be filled when that which you are to see shall come. When you would fill a purse, knowing how large a present it is to hold, you stretch wide its cloth or leather. Knowing how much you are to put in it and seeing that the purse is small, you extend it to make more room. So by withholding the vision, God extends the longing. Through longing, he makes the soul extend. By extending it, he makes room in it. So, brethren, let us long, because we are to be filled.